Well, excellent. Since we seem ready to get the ball rolling, so I guess, I will go ahead and introduce Zoe, who is our marketing associate. She's going to be leading tonight's conversation and has a couple of, fun discussion questions for us. I suppose I should also introduce myself. My name is Molly. I'm the CraftBoston manager, and I've been working very closely with all of our staff here at the Society of Arts and Crafts to get our current show, CraftBoston Fiber Stories, up and running. And we're so thrilled to have a few of our participants here tonight and also some community members here to chat about, just sort of that innate connection between the fiber arts and storytelling and how stories are woven, no pun intended, into every piece that a fiber artist creates. So we'll be getting started here in just a minute, but before we go too much further, I have to say, or I would love to say, a quick thank you to our partners and sponsors in presenting fiber stories. Can you all see this okay? We're so thrilled to be working with so many organizations, many of whom work directly with the fiber arts community, and we really couldn't do it without their help. So thank you so much to all of those collaborators in presenting this show. And without further ado, Zoe, you can get us started.
Welcome all. I've been with the Society of Arts and Crafts for about 1 year. I do a lot of the marketing, graphic design work for them, and I'm an artist myself. I do illustration, and I come from a family of fiber artists, and on my father's side, my earliest understanding of the fiber arts was on my father's side, where we are from Norway. And I remember that every holiday, all of my family would come in from Sandefjord and Bergen, Norway, and they would all be wearing the most beautiful Norwegian sweaters. And we would all be given a Norwegian sweater when we were born. And there was like this whole history of the Norwegian sweater with these very intricate, beautiful patterns. And I remember being held close to my aunts and oldemor, who was that's old mother in Norwegian, and smelling the wool from the sweaters. And I just always remember that. But I was going to start with what inspires you, where your inspiration came from to become a fiber artist. But I think with Brigida, so excited about the fiber fails. Why don't we begin with fiber fails, and then we can move on to, where we found inspiration to become fiber artists. So Brigida, who would like to start? Does somebody have a story they'd like to begin with? And we're going to kind of keep this conversation sort of casual and just sort of letting it move between all of us, and just a space to talk and connect.
Sure, I'll be happy to share. So as everybody kind of figured out by now from my accent, I'm not from America. I'm from Europe. I'm from Germany, to be precise. And when I grew up back in the days when dinosaurs roamed the earth, we had in elementary, we were all kids were exposed to the arts. So it was mandatory. You couldn't get out of it. And I absolutely loved learning weaving in first grade, crocheting in second, knitting in third, and enameling in fourth, which I found a little weird, with a hot oven, but it worked out. So it was a completely different upbringing. My mom, is a knitter, is a crocheter, and I am kind of okay with it, but I love working with my hands. I'm very, very drawn to the fiber arts for a variety of reasons. And now I'm going to share, one of my recent things, which I will happily admit is a total fiber fail. And then, you guys can share yours. So what you see here in the background is, what appears to be a dress, right? I thought it was, I got it from eBay, and it arrived, and of course, it was way too small. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? And when I had a quiet moment, I just started cutting into it. I don't know what rode me, but I started to cut into it, and what I ended up is strips, right? And you can do all kinds of things with fiber strips, as the artists here in the room know. But what I did with it, I also had this fabric here, which is kind of like consists of a lot of different paillettes, I guess, and cutting into that is a total nightmare, but I did regardless. And I ended up with, I hope you can see this, with a necklace, with a jewel, I wouldn't really call it jewelry. Let's just say it's a necklace. And it consists of the fabric of the dress that I just knotted, and then all kinds of weird bits and pieces, of other fabrics that I had lying around, including this weird black stuff, knotted it all together, fastened it, and Viola, now it is,
Put it on, Brigitte.
yeah, now it is a necklace. And yeah, there you go. So from a dress to something completely different. And as you can see, I still have plenty of stuff to play with. And this is, one of the things that I wanted to say, what I like about all craft is that they are in many respects an invitation to play. And I would love to hear more from the artists who do this professionally, what their take is on playfulness in their work and how they come to their creative expression and how planned it is or how much is left to, kind of chance. And thank you for indulging me here.
Of course. I love it. Does anybody else have a fiber fail that they would like to share? Like a time when they tried to produce a piece of art and it just went completely south and didn't work out?
I would like to say that oh, you probably can't hear me. Can you hear me? You can. I very rarely have a fail because if it's failing, I just rip it all out and start again. I never waste the yarn because yarn is so precious to me, and I always use yarn that's really good quality. So ripping out is just a way of life.
Okay. Have you ever had a time where you felt like it was becoming a fail, but you didn't rip it out? You instead pushed through it and you came out with something that you loved even more?
I'll have something that it comes out to be not exactly the size that I intended, and then I've repurposed things, or if I was making it for myself, I've given it away to somebody who it would fit. So, but the sweaters that I make for babies and children are very traditional, and I try to use some of the traditional kind of patterns that people in UK and even in Scotland used the fisherman knit sort of patterns. And my husband and I, on one of our trips, were in Scotland, and there was a small museum that was, I think we were the only people in it, but they had some of the really early knitting machines that people used, crofters used to earn money making their they were machine knit in their homes. And so they had some just swatches that were like 12 by 12 size swatches of all the different patterns. And they were traditional patterns that were family named. So apparently if a fisherman was lost at sea and they recovered his body, they could tell who it was by the pattern because it was a family pattern, which is a little ghastly. But so I took pictures when I was there. I took pictures of all the patterns. I've incorporated some of those patterns, and I have found them in some books that show patterns too. But the biggest enjoyment for me in this endeavor is the creating, putting different patterns together, and designing things that I know will fit the little bodies. And that's the pleasure for me, knowing that I've made something useful, something that somebody can use and wear.
Are you familiar with the Norwegian sweaters I was talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, with the little silver buttons. And my family were all sea captains as well, but I don't think they had, I don't remember a specific emblem or something that would, mark the family.
The sweaters that you're talking about probably had like multicolor and a pattern that was woven like in a yoke, or no?
Yeah, that's right. They always had like a sort of a blue collar, and then they were often blues and reds and whites is what I remember of them.
I actually made a sweater for myself years ago in that kind of style with the yoke pattern. in blues and whites. And I just recently gave it to my oldest granddaughter because she wears it and it fits her much better than it fits me now. So,
I've got to say, I was just so fascinated to hear that bit about how, you know, the pattern could be so tied up in somebody's identity that, you know, you'd be able to recognize them purely by that pattern of the sweater. I'd never heard that before. And that's a really interesting element to add to it.
And also shows how they expect this durability with the fabric, because you think of these fishermen and captains getting lost at sea and their bodies, you know, it's hard to imagine, but there must be a lot of durability to that wool that they made those patterns in.
And they were
a little morbid what we're talking about, I know. Thank you. That's fascinating. Sure. Yeah.
I have to say, I really don't consider myself a professional. You know, my profession was in education. I was a teacher for years and a principal, retired as a principal. I was a principal for years. And but I learned to knit when I was 10 years old. So I've always been a knitter, and really my enthusiasm for it resurfaced when I had grandchildren, and that's when I started really looking for patterns, and then thinking, I know I can design something I like better, and designing my own patterns for my grandchildren. And then of course they've all outgrown the sizes that I like to make, because I tediously work through making bigger sizes. The last time I made a sweater for myself, I was so tired of the sweater by the time I finished it. I haven't even worn it yet. But I love to make the little sizes because they're so quick, and you know, I have instant gratification. Within a few days, I've got a sweater made.
Very cool. Sally, did you want to share something? I feel like you started to speak.
Oh, yes, I have a fiber fail.
Okay.
I couldn't find the pieces, but them were in my studio. But talking about knitting, my mother was a fabulous knitter, and I grew up watching her knit sweaters. Yet she never taught me how to knit, nor my sisters. And so when I was in my 40s, I thought, I'm going to take a knitting class. I want to learn. And I couldn't knit to save my life. It just drop a stitch and I don't notice for 2 inches. And I just made a very long, ugly looking scarf. But I love yarn and fiber, and I work with wire in my basketry. I learned traditional basketry with reed, but I evolved into working immediately with wire because that's what I'm interested in. So I thought I can combine wire with yarn and make what I was calling fuzzy little baskets. And they looked kind of like Martians, and nobody understood them. I thought they were fabulous, but nobody understood them in one of the galleries that I had them in. And they sat there and they sat there, and then they were put in a little box and came back to my studio to sit. But I still have a lot of yarn that I got because I was so excited about this. And one skein I have right here is made with vintage saris that I guess are somehow made into yarn for weaving, and put it up here and maybe you can see a little more closely. It's really fascinating colors and textures in this, and I'm not giving up. When I have a free moment, I am going to just try a different form of fuzzy little baskets that maybe with another 20 years of experience in me, I can do. But there are these ideas that they don't work out the first time, but at least for me, I don't forget them. Most artists don't forget ideas that they think are brilliant, but the world doesn't recognize their brilliance yet. You know, it's probably because I haven't achieved the means to display it that way with creating it. So it's on a very, very, very back burner, but I haven't forgotten that because I love the texture of yarn and fiber. But until then, wire and paper is me.
Very cool. Was there a, for any of you, was there a time that you discovered some new fabric you hadn't worked with, or some sort of fiber you hadn't worked with yet that led to a whole new type of art that you were creating? Something that you discovered that led to a complete new type of project or work? I'm thinking that when you say that that yarn was made out of saris, it's just interesting to think of these surprises behind some of these fabrics.
Yeah, I saw years ago a very pivotal piece of artwork for me in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it's by a woman named Merritt Oppenheim, and it is a fur bowl. It's about the size of a cereal bowl, and it's made out of some kind of fur or cowhide or whatever. You can Google MoMA and ask for Merritt Oppenheim, and the piece will pick up. But I saw that when I was still in, I think I'd just gotten out of grad school, and that image never left my mind. And I knew that somehow that was important for me. And that's when I then, years later, started learning traditional basketry, but thinking of Merritt Oppenheim's little bowl made out of fur, I knew I wanted to make baskets out of alternative materials. But I knew I first had to learn how to make baskets. So that's why I took the traditional classes in them. But I haven't worked with fur yet, but, or fake fur. I don't think I'd be too comfortable working with real fur these days, but fake fur. But, you know, I've never forgotten that piece because it was just a pivotal piece inside my head for me to hold on to for many years.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that would lead to another question that I had, which was, what inspired each of you to become fiber artists? Was there a moment like what Sally's describing where you saw something? Was it something that as a child you felt? Was there something that you saw at a museum that made sense to you? Was it something like with me, with my Norwegian family coming in with these sweaters and this sort of history of the sweater in our family? Do you guys remember when that moment struck you where you saw something that made you feel like this is what I want to be and this is what I want to create?
I see a hand from Deborah.
Hey, Deborah. I had to scroll up here to find you.
Deborah, do you?
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
I went to British Columbia as a rebel in the early 70s and found a child's loom in a store. And you can imagine in the middle of British Columbia, there weren't very many stores, but in this particular, I think it was a hardware store that had a little section for children's toys. And so it was a little tiny loom, which you can easily find now, but in those days it was, I think it was new. It was just at the beginning of this crafts movement. And I brought it back to the barn and I sat there mesmerized for 3 weeks and created these squares of fabric that were shocking to me. And everyone looked at them and said, oh my goodness, they're amazing. And I thought, I need to get a real loom. So I came back to Boston, and there was a place in Cambridge called Earth Guild, which was the first real craft store that ever opened in this area. And they had a bigger loom, still small. I bought that and I started creating, I started creating small blankets, and then I started creating shawls, and then I decided I wanted a bigger loom, and then I found floor looms and etc. So for me, it was a progression. And I had a store in Stockbridge I finally opened for yarns and also selling my own things. And then I went on to New York and did a lot of fabric for some of the New York stores. And then I went back to teaching. And I forgot all about, put it on, just put it aside and decided, no, I just want to do my teaching, had my children. And then one day I unearthed my large loom, put it back together again, and it's sitting here in my living room. And I've been doing it for, I don't know, a very long time now. But it's become more of a profession than a hobby at this point, or an avocation. So I'm still teaching, but I'm doing a lot of weaving. So
Nice.
I have a question for you, Deborah. So is that large loom that you have in the background, is that the same one that you bought when you got back from British Columbia? Oh no, you've upgraded since then.
Yeah. This is the 5th one, and this one has, this one of course has a computer driven mechanism on it, so that my computer, obviously connects to it. But it's my 5th large loom. My first one was from Cranbrook, Michigan, and it required, you had 12 treadles, but you only have 2 feet, and it was a whole different system of weaving. Much more complicated because it didn't have the technology. Now it's more complicated on a different level, but it's the designing part that's more complicated now, because you have all this ability to, to create these great things with all this technology. But a lot of my fibers are from Habu, which is in California, and she does shopping really mostly in Asia, and brings back these extraordinary fibers that are made with steel core and just things that I would never imagine, and certainly that you can't find easily. And those are the things that I work with, because I find them to just create items that are just explode with another level that fibers that you can buy readily as a weaver, cannot. I used to work with silk a lot, which is gorgeous and wonderful. And then when you were talking before about fiber gone bad, I had woven some screens, the large, like 3-paneled wooden screens that you have in a room. It was 250 threads per inch. And yeah, that went bad. It was heartbreaking, but it was so difficult to weave. It did not work. And I was sure that it would work, and I just kept going. And by the time I finished threading it, it was impossible to weave. And you can imagine 250 threads per inch, and you've got 48 inches.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's just.
Yeah. So that was my memory of things gone bad. It was probably not a week that you should have been around me. But yeah, it passed, and I just kept going, and I love it. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Deborah. That's a great story. It's great to hear the history behind your work as well.
Yeah.
Michelle, was your hand up, Michelle?
It was denim, which is what I'm showing in the online shop. I volunteered at a thrift shop, and I couldn't get over how much denim was being thrown out, and I kept making things with it, bags and whatever. And then I started picking them apart, and I started to really fall in love with the wear patterns. Like when you wear a pair of jeans and you always sit the same way or whatever, you get these wonderful creases at the knees or in the thighs. And so that's when I started picking them apart, just to salvage those parts. And I've been doing all this denim work now since. I have a show up in New Jersey right now. I'm part of a show, and there are 3 pieces, and it's all salvage denim.
Are all those baskets in back of you full of denim?
No. Some of them are. The denim is down here, but I'm working right now with tea bags labels.
Oh, amazing.
Oh my gosh.
I just work with lots of something. I find something that speaks to me, and then I collect it. And this is just from my husband and I drinking.
Oh,
What is that going to become, Michelle?
Well, it's on a spool, and it's about 70 feet.
oh my goodness.
And as long as we drink tea, I will be doing this.
Oh.
And I have a lot of projects like that.
Yeah, I really applaud your approach, Michelle, about going to a thrift store and recycling these items. When we were still in Seaport, located as an organization, we had an artist come in. I think her name was Michelle Luigi. I could be wrong. You're right. So
Yeah.
she came in and showed everyone how to crochet with plastic bags.
Yeah.
Right. She just got from Shop and Save or what have you, you know, so I really applaud these efforts. But when I saw your work in our shop, the beautiful denim pieces that you make, I was immediately reminded of G. Spence, the quilt makers.
Yeah.
And you know, who also used old overalls and old jeans, you know, and created something truly spectacular. And you know, if anybody's not familiar with it, just in case, you know, I put a link in the chat to look it up. But there's you know, a relationship there. So my question to you is, you know, you are obviously, you know, aware, you know, of this group, and does the design that these women from that quilting group employ in any way, is it referenced in your work? Do you take inspiration from them, or is it completely a separate thing?
Oh, the coverlets are definitely inspired by a quilt that I saw of theirs. But in my 20s, I made a quilt out of denim, but small pieces. They are so heavy, they're uncomfortable to sleep under, which is why I don't back my coverlets. So they're thin, they're still denim, but those quilts must be so heavy. And I mean physically heavy, not like warm heavy. I don't know how warm it's cotton, but that is why I made a choice to make them single layer. And I sleep under one and I love it. It's perfect for the summer. But yes, I love their quilts. I love the spontaneity, and I'm really inspired also by outsider art, where you have to make, and you make with whatever you've got around you. And that's really jazzes me. I love seeing that.
Well, I have so many questions. First of all, how long, like what time period has it taken you to accumulate that number of the tea bag labels?
Oh, I have that written down. I started collecting them in 2013.
Okay. So it's been a little while. This isn't like just in the span of the last
No,
year.
my husband's British, and we don't drink coffee. We only drink tea. So yeah, I also collect my own hair, and I've been watching it go gray. And I've been doing that since 2014, I think. 16, maybe 16, anyhow. So I have a lot of pieces like this.
Is there a project that you're going to make out of the hair?
It is the way I store it is the project. I've shown it once in Boston. I show it on a line. I just make rings with it and take it off. My son is totally disgusted by it. Don't put it in the room with me.
I love this idea. I think it's very cool because my hair is going good.
I roll them around my fingers and I end up with rings, and I've just been threading them on a cable. And then every year I put a knitting counter and I put the date. So it's 2016 or whatever. And then I start a new year. And I have two, so I showed them just as a line. And as I'm getting older, they're definitely getting whiter. So it's going to be a very slow transition.
I love it. It's very, very cool. There's kind of a bigger question that comes to mind when I hear your story and what Deborah was saying about finding the little child loom, which is how, like, what was your first project that all of you made as a fiber artist, and how has it evolved to what you're currently doing? Like, what is the difference between the beginning and the current?
Well, when I started school, I started first grade in Switzerland in a French school, and everybody, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name, in Germany, the girls had to learn fiber arts. So I learned how to knit, hem handkerchiefs, all of that stuff. Yeah. And the boys got to draw, and I was furious. So I have a pair of bright yellow socks when I was told to go out and get dark yarn. So I do knit, and I do love it. But for me, it started more not as art, but as utilitarian stuff that I did around the home, making quilts so that we were warm. And then my dog died, and I was so heartbroken. The only way I could process it was to save all the bags that I didn't use to pick up after him, and I knit a sculpture of him.
Wow.
And it houses his ashes. And that for me was the first piece where I thought, oh, it doesn't have to be useful, but it really helped me heal. And I did study art therapy in college, so it's like this circle. I always come back.
Yeah,
So that's my first piece where it clicked.
Does anybody else have that moment where they found that moment where something made sense and they started to find their path as a fiber artist? Or anybody want to share that moment?
Laura, go ahead.
Hi, I wouldn't say I'm a fiber artist, but I love working with fiber, and it's more of a hobby for me. But this past year has been strange for all of us. And a few things happened this past year that made me have to express myself through a piece of work. And I chose knitting, and I designed a Fair Isle sweater. My mother's family are originally from Scotland, and what happened this last year was that there was a terrible event that happened in 1997, and an Indian girl was beaten to death. And it was 10 years before that, in 1987, that my brother had been killed. And in both cases, the people who had done it had not taken responsibility for it, and had just literally laughed it off. And so the girl that was responsible for this person's death was up for parole this past year, and she never admitted her responsibility, even though there were witnesses. And she had initially, I guess, not realized the extent of the legal trouble she was in. Somehow had initially admitted that she was this person. So I just thought, all these people not taking responsibility for things they did. And I don't know if people remembered this, but Donald Trump was asked, do you take responsibility for the handling of the COVID pandemic? And he said, no, I don't take responsibility for it. And that moment just incensed me. I just, for some reason, just found this incredible rage. And so what I did is I designed this sweater that, in a way to try to bring people together. I designed it with a traditional Fair Isle pattern. It's from Sankahar, and it is a drum. There's 5 traditional patterns from that area, and one of them is called the drum. And the drum in Scotland was always a call to action. And then I paired that with, I transliterated from a photograph from the Victoria and Albert Museum, a pattern from Sindh in India of a traditional Kes pattern. And it's really interesting because India and Scotland and Iran are the only places that have had a real tradition of plaids and checks as a very historical type of woven fabric and knit fabric. And so I designed this sweater to sort of literally knit the two stories and the emotion that I felt in this garment. And it was a sweater, and it really felt good to be able to do something with the emotion.
And thank you, Laura, for sharing this very personal stories. And I'm truly sorry for your loss. But I think you're touching on something that's extremely important, and that my colleagues and I here have heard a lot in the various artist conversation, and that is the connection between the fiber arts and healing, therapeutic, or healing just through the act of making. And I would love if you could share other stories that you may have had personally, or that you have observed, where the fiber arts have really supported yourself or somebody else in a healing process. And I don't want to put anybody kind of on the spotlight if this is too uncomfortable a topic to discuss. We certainly understand. all I will say is that I was personally really impressed how the fiber community or the sewing community specifically stepped up when, you know, the whole plague started, and the medical community and everybody was, you know, out of mask, and you all remember this mask sewing craze, and, you know, I found that a remarkable effort, a remarkable effort of what the craft community can do and is willing to do, stepping outside of their own immediate needs and just being there for community. I find that is a remarkable thing that's especially prevalent in the fiber arts. And I have seen all kinds of other craft communities. I come from metal myself, so but I found in fiber, that's a big, big thing, community and helping. So if anybody would like to, you know, add to that, I would love to hear it.
And I just want to touch on that. There was also a story during the pandemic of, I believe it was in Detroit, of a center that welcomed these youth that were coming from really troubled backgrounds, and they started a knitting club. And all of these little children, boys and girls who are like between 10 and 16, really got into it, and it became their sanctuary, the meditation, like these children coming from the most horrific backgrounds, but somehow they found this incredible peace behind knitting. So what you're talking about, Brigitte, really reminds me of that too, that very healing space for them with this meditative, the repetitiveness of some of these crafts as well. But I'd love to hear as well if anybody has something to, from their own, you know, background that is similar to what we're talking about.
I think for me, one of the most healing elements of, you know, these stories that can find themselves baked into fiber craft is the ability to contain memory. And the specific example that I'm thinking of, my family has a tradition of needle pointing, which is, you know, not necessarily the kind of craft that we were looking to include in this show, but it's, you know, it's my background, it's what I'm familiar with. And my grandmother was a very active needle pointer, but her arthritis reached a point where she couldn't do it quite as much anymore. But she had always had this sort of dream of making a needlepoint nativity scene. She loved the holiday season, and this was something that she always wanted to do, and just a project that she never realized. But my mom and a bunch of my cousins and I, who were needle pointers, decided one year that we would divvy up all the work, because it's an incredible amount of work that goes into creating all those different figures and getting them done by the deadline to be finished. And, you know, we each contributed a piece or two here. And I was very new to needlepoint at the time. I was very young. So I was given all of the sheep and the donkeys and the animals that were deemed not terrifically important. And, you know, if I messed up, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And, you know, we, at the holiday season, presented my grandmother with this nativity scene that we had all come together to create. And, you know, sadly, she's no longer with us, but being able to inherit that scene and have it be something that is still shared among my family is, I think, just a wonderful way to remember her and the tradition that she passed along to all of us. So that's, I suppose, what I can add about the healing and the memory elements here in the fiber arts.
Definitely, that's beautiful. Does anybody else have something that they wanted to share related to that for healing? I know it's kind of a personal subject, so it's fine if we don't.
I don't have any particular story that you know, that is a healing process in my work, but just overall, I think knitting, like you said, the repetition of knitting is so soothing. I think a lot of people find comfort in that, and a lot of people, it's a great time to just, you know, you're within yourself. It is a form of meditation. So a very solitary pursuit, but it's a very soothing kind of pursuit. You asked earlier what our first project was, or our first something that we made. And the first thing I actually created was a red turtleneck sweater for my Boston Terrier dog.
How did that turn out?
It was the first thing that I made, the first knit product that was useful. It's, you know, wasn't just making a swatch or something. With this red turtleneck sweater for my dog. But I was, you know, I made many sweaters for my son growing up, and made sweaters for myself, you know, off and on. And but when my first grandson was born, they were actually living in Germany. They were living in Bavaria, and so we went to visit several times. But we were, I think we were in Salzburg on just a little trip, and my daughter-in-law saw the traditional sweater with the silver buttons and the garter stitch pattern. So it was like all navy blue with gray around the neckline and down the front and around the cuffs and the bottom, very traditional. And my daughter-in-law was just, oh, I really would love to have that for our son. And I said, well, I can make that. And she was okay. So that was the kind of the turning point in me thinking. I was near retirement, and I thought, you know, this is something I'd like to do in retirement, is just to make little sweaters. And I would be interested in people's experiences about marketing their products, because I've had 2 different stores that have carried my sweaters, and I have to say I'm ready to not do that anymore. I just wish I could sell everything online, because it wasn't a terrible experience, but I feel like my sweaters have, you know, they fall on the floor and people sort of handle them and maul them, and I, you know, was picking them up and rewashing them and things like that. And I just thought, you know, this last during the pandemic, I just thought I had picked everything up from the last store that had my sweaters, and you know, it's just going to be all online. And then I got an email from you saying, would you be interested in doing the Fiber Art show? I thought, well, this is a better alternative for me, doing online and doing things like this in an art community kind of setting, rather than putting my sweaters out in a retail store. That I'm interested in what other people, how other people market their things, and
Definitely.
I had sold art designed knitwear for a gallery that was called the She Said Gallery, and it was specifically women artisans and craftspeople. And I found the same thing. I did a whole series of children's hats. I don't know if you guys remember when children's hats, people started making like little bear hats with ears and all that kind of stuff. And I designed ones that looked like strawberries with the leaves and the stem coming out the top, and had just a lot of fun doing it. But there was just not the supervision of the items. I think people think with knitwear, well, it's not that big a deal. And the same thing is that they seem to be getting thrown around and the whole bit. And I don't know what the answer is, maybe Etsy or something like that, but it is a problem with, and the She Said Gallery was a small place, and it was well supervised and well run, but it was not ideal. And I just, after 2 seasons of having my stuff there, I just decided it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, the supervision, you know, in a retail environment is an issue. It always is, you know, we're not even talking about theft here. You know, we're just talking about handling of sensitive materials who, you know, are impacted by the sweat from our hands, or the dyes, or you know, makeup, or, you know, kind of just general carelessness. Books are another issue. So what bookstores typically do is they have one copy out that people can leaf through, and then if they decide they like it, then they can buy the one that's in shrink wrap. So if I were in your shoes, that's kind of what I would do, have one thing that people can throw around and wear, and then the rest kind of pre-packed, and that might help. But it is difficult in an in-person environment to exercise the proper supervision, because people, it's a sensitive material, and not everybody handles it with white gloves as we would like. That's just the reality. But I'm glad that you find our environment suitable, and I know you already sold within the very first day or two, you sold one of your adorable sweaters, and so congratulations. I saw that with great delight.
Well, there's also something about fiber. Everybody wears fiber. So there's a comfort level with touching it. I mean, I show my work in galleries and people go right up and grab it. And there's a part of me, I go, and then I think, no, actually that's normal. They're so comfortable with it that they're used to touching their clothes. They're used to touching sheets. So I'm torn. But most of the stuff that I make that's not true. Some of it can be washed, some of it can't. And it's, there's nothing you can do about it because people will touch it because it's comfort. It's familiar, and they feel like you touch art. You never touch a painting, but I can't tell you how many people touched my work on the walls.
Well, craft is experienced differently. Craft is a very immediate medium, and the haptic experience, the ability to touch it, is 95% of the experience. So, to the extent that it can be mitigated, kind of with the examples that I just said, have one example out that people can do whatever they want with it, and the rest, kind of in a cleaner environment, that would be one way. But that's craft. And anywhere you go, if it's a hobbyist market, or if it's CraftBoston, people will want to touch, because that makes the experience for them. And that's what we're in. Yes, we are handcrafters, and we are proud of our craftsmanship, but we are actually in the experience business. And if we do not provide these experiences, I think we're taking away from the pleasant factor on the other side, because the customer wants to have that deep sense and that pleasure of experience. It's important.
Yeah,
we're not in a museum.
I thoroughly agree with you, because for me, as soon as I pick up a new yarn and I start a sweater, it's about the feel of the yarn, and I specifically choose my yarns because I know they're soft and they won't irritate baby skin, and they're washable and all of that. So obviously I would love to have people be able to touch them, because I think they'd certainly be more likely to buy them if they feel them and say, whoa, this is really soft and soothing and comforting. And but I wonder how much the pandemic will change people's shopping experience, because I think a lot more people have gone online to just purchase things online. And I did find, during the pandemic, my online sales did increase somewhat. Just, a couple of people found me and then said, oh, every time I need a baby gift, I'm going to buy a sweater of yours. So, without feeling them, just seeing pictures of them, purchasing something, it's an interesting phenomenon that they will do that, and trust that my work is the quality that they're hoping it is.
And I even wonder, with the pandemic, kind of like what you're saying, there's a hesitation, even if you're in a store, just to touch as much as people used to want to touch everything. And now, since the pandemic, there's much more hesitation to touch each other, to touch things other people have touched. I've seen that in stores myself. You're used to everybody just wanting to be all over everything, but now we're kind of in a new world.
It
Yeah.
was when we were, you know, when 2020 came around and we had to unfortunately cancel the spring show, but we're still hoping to do the holiday show last year. In the you know, leading up to the event, those were certainly considerations that we on the organizer side were thinking about. We had long discussions. How can we not only manage the flow of the public through this space? Do we have to do time tickets, but also exactly what you're saying, what if people touch items, you know? So if you have, let's just say ceramics, so that's a more or less non-porous surface, and you just, you know, you wipe it clean and everybody's happy. But what about fabrics? You know, and nobody knew how this virus is transmitted, and you know, you touch this, and everybody was kind of not knowing much. And in the end, you know, the whole organizational part, aside from the pandemic, you know, was such a burden on everybody. The artists then said, oh, we would rather you don't do the holiday show, or you don't do any in-person show until this passes. So we listened to the artists, right? You know, we're here to serve the artists, and it was definitely a huge consideration. So you are right on the money there with your question. I will say though that I think craft buyers, they're kind of like an insider audience. Very often they already understand what the medium is, they understand what it is that they're looking at, and they are fairly comfortable buying online. And I say that because just the other day we sold an item, a felted item that was $4,800. And if you had asked me a year ago, will somebody buy, you know, in the environment of 5K online, I would have said, highly unlikely. Now we know, yes, it happens, because people actually do understand what they're looking at, even without touching it. And I find that quite interesting, really. I'm sure there's going to be psychological research about it.
Probably.
And I'm going to read all about it. But yeah, it's a change. It's a huge change with how people experience craft.
And I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Zoe.
You go ahead, Molly. It's okay.
An organization that has some, you know, people trust that you've.
Uh-oh.
We lost.
I don't, do you know if you can move a little bit closer to your microphone? We're just having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
I'm just wondering if there's a difference. People will trust CraftBoston and buying things from your through your shows that you have, because they know they can trust the quality of the items that you present.
Well, I certainly hope that that's true. You know, we do take a lot of pride in working with makers who are, you know, at the top of their field and working in ways that may be new and unexpected. And, you know, certainly take a lot of pride in maintaining our connections with other craft organizations and experts in the field. But I think, again, to your point about, you know, sort of how to make that connection with a buyer when touch and touch of the object isn't possible in the same way, I think, and getting to a sense of the quality of the piece. I think getting to know the maker and getting to know the story behind, you know, how they learned their craft and how they came to this technique and how this particular piece was created, you know, that part of the story is very important to us as well. It's what we try to emphasize in the profiles and in the different you know, programs and events and everything that we put on, so that it's not just the item, it's the item plus the maker plus the story. And I think that is a very potent combination. But I don't want to make this all about us. So if you all have additional questions for each other, you know, this is your time, it is your space. We've got another couple minutes here. And you know, just before you take off in that direction, I do want to say a huge thank you to all of you for being here tonight. It's very special to be here and to hear the stories. We're so grateful to have all of you here.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the last few minutes, we just wanted to turn the questions over to you. If there was a question that you had for each other that you felt like you wanted to ask. Sorry about.
Yeah, Deborah.
Okay, thank you. I do actually have a question. It doesn't have anything to do with our show. There is a women's homeless place in Boston called Rosie's Place. And in the wintertime, the things that can be used, like shawls or scarves or whatever, that I have left that I don't want to carry over to another season, I will drop off there. And I would love it if people could join me in maybe creating a donation of things that women can use for the winter time. So I'm just putting it out there that I would love to email me if anyone has items that they think would be helpful. They're women, but they're also women with children, but their children are generally not as small for baby sweaters. So it's not, they're young kids. And it's a small place. But I know that they're always asking for things like socks. So I give what I can. So if anyone is interested in joining or can think of something that would be helpful, that would be great.
My suggestion is, this is a fiber story, and the whole theme for this time right now is fiber stories. We want to tell the stories that come with the medium, that come with the makers who create the artwork. And my suggestion for you is that you get in touch actually with Zoe here, who runs our newsletter.
Okay.
And so she can, write this up together with you. And if you are comfortable, we can add some way to connect with you and then send this out in one of our next newsletter as a fiber story where, this is featured in some form, and then it could go out to a broader network. That's the most immediate thing that I could offer, because it would be a wonderful fit, and we would be happy to support you with this project.
Oh, that would be amazing. I mean, if you can get more items to homeless center. I mean, it's also Pine Street Inn, which is men. Obviously for the women, it's easier to imagine what you could make. But I mean, I just feel like these are shelters, and they're obviously because of COVID's not going away terribly soon. On one level, yeah, but on another level, no, as we know. So it's making things very difficult for, for the homeless, obviously. So that's just, I mean, it's always difficult. But anyway, it's an endeavor that I would love people to join with. So, okay. Zoe,
Absolutely.
For a while, Deborah. I remember Rosie's Place. It's down on Newberry Street, I think, right?
It's off of Newberry. Yeah, it's down by Pine Street Inn, and in East Boston. Well, it's not East Boston, but
I'll connect with you and we'll figure out a way to get that into.
That would be great.
Coming up, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you. I think we are almost out of time. Molly, was there anything else that we have only a few minutes?
No, there's nothing else from me, but once again, just a huge thank you to everyone for being here tonight. We're so grateful that you were willing to come and share your story and participate here. And I'll be following up with the recording link and everything afterward. But thank you again so much for your time.
Great.
Thank you from all of us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. You too. You as well.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.